Revealed, the billionaire's son spat on all nannies but gave a surprising kiss to one black maid. Ethan Prescott stood by the grand pillars of his family's mansion, the polished marble reflecting a life of luxury he'd never truly valued. Nannies had come and gone, each one brimming with enthusiasm that crumbled under the weight of his indifference. As whispers of privileged upbringing danced through the air, they all eventually left, unable to steer this rebellious boy away from his scornful demeanor. His reputation did not just precede him, it followed like a shadow through the halls of their opulent home. But Clara was different. The black maid spent her days sweeping and organizing without delusion of grandeur, her strength woven into every tired fiber of her being. In their rare moments together, she'd fill the silence with stories of resilience that enveloped Ethan like a warm embrace. He'd listen, sometimes leaning in closer, fighting the clenching throat that threatened each time he felt a flicker of understanding. Clara wasn't a mere staff member. She was a reservoir of wisdom, laughter, and unapologetic dignity that illuminated a world he didn't know existed. Ethan struggled with this unexpected connection. The juxtaposition of their lives weighed heavily on him. When he caught glimpses of Clara standing resolute, her hands calloused yet kind, questions began to gnaw at the back of his mind. Why did she deserve respect, while he was merely granted it? The glimmer of recognition sparked off the walls of his imperial bubble, igniting an internal war. Outside, his peers prattled on about social statuses, the hottest trends, and mutual backstabbing disguised as friendship. They thrived on superficiality, while Clara reminded him that dignity was a choice, not a commodity. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the walls of expectation tightened around him like a vice, a scandal began to bubble within their stratosphere. Talk of Ethan's father, the mighty tech mogul, leaked hints of corruption festering beneath the shine of his empire. The impending chaos clawed at Ethan, stirring feelings of discomfort and fear. What did loyalty mean when the foundation you stood upon began to shake? Distorted memories of Nanny's scoldings danced through his mind, yet the contrast to Clara's unwavering confidence brought with it a stirring dissonance. Where do you stand, Ethan?
Clara's voice broke through the haze of his racing thoughts, piercing every layer of conflict wrapped tightly around his heart. Her eyes shone with understanding, devotion, and an invitation that felt both wondrous and dangerous. Just as his resolve began to strengthen, a cacophony of whispers crescendoed through the mansion. Ethan felt cornered, the pillars around him not shielding but imprisoning. The impending truth of his family's misdeeds promised to collapse his reality. Was he ready to accept Clara's moral fortitude, or would he return to the false comfort of belonging within elitism? And as the echo of footsteps approached, a wave of despair crashed over him, leaving the question lingering in the air, unresolved. A pivotal moment threaded with suffocating uncertainty, one that could either unite or further unravel him. Ethan stared at the polished marble beneath his feet, the cold surface grounding him in a reality that felt increasingly detached. Clara's question hung between them, heavy with significance. As the footsteps approached, panic surged through him. He could feel the fracture lines in his world deepening. Each footfall echoed a truth he was reluctant to confront, the growing suspicion that his father's empire was made of lies, built on foundations that could crumble at any moment. He forced himself to take a breath, to meet Clara's gaze. Her unwavering presence gave him pause. She was a stark contrast to everything in his life. Where he saw chaos looming, she radiated certainty. But what did he truly know about himself? Beyond the luxurious lifestyle that had shaped him, who was Ethan Prescott? The question invaded his mind, demanding answers. "Clara," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, but the words failed to materialize. His thoughts wrestled with the implications of his father's impending scandal. Loyalty to a father or moral integrity? The absence of clarity stifled him. Though he was afraid to unravel his own privilege, Clara offered him a sense of purpose, an unyielding strength that he desperately needed in the face of uncertainty. "Don't let fear dictate your choices," Clara said softly, her words curling around him like a protective cloak. "You have the power to choose who you want to be." With those simple words, the tension in his chest began to shift. Clara didn't steer him away from his upbringing. Instead, she seemed to invite him to harness his questions as stepping stones towards growth. The footsteps grew louder, and Ethan shifted uneasily. The ominous buzzing of idle chatter and snickers from the gathering crowd made his heart race. Would they see him as merely an extension of his father's oppressive legacy? Feeling like a trapped animal, Ethan's instincts kicked in. He needed clarity. The time had come to face the truth, not just of his father's potential wrongdoings, but of his own existence. "Do you believe I can choose differently?" he asked Clara, vulnerability seeping into his voice. It irritated him to feel weak, yet within that irritation was a rush of determination. Her eyes met his, unflinching in their resolve. "Yes, but only if you decide to step out of this gilded cage," she replied. The confidence in her voice struck him like a lightning bolt. "You can redefine who you are, not your father, not your privilege, but you." Ethan's mind whirred with newfound possibilities, each spinning fraught with responsibility. He could choose to confront his father, to expose the truth that lay hidden beneath layers of wealth and deceit. He could shed the frivolities he had clung to and embrace the strength Clara embodied. Yet still the terrifying fear of alienation gripped his heart. What would it mean to sever ties to a legacy that defined him? Before he could process these burgeoning thoughts, an imposing figure appeared at the entrance of the hallway. It was his father, the very image of power and success, oblivious to the turmoil that swirled beneath the surface of their lives. The tension in the room thickened as Ethan felt the collective gaze shift to him. "Ethan," his father boomed, a command masked as a greeting. The moment teetered between reverence and defiance. "We need to speak, now." Ethan's pulse quickened, the magnitude of his choices exploding within him. Would he uphold the family facade or dare to embrace the uncomfortable truth? As his heart raced, he exchanged one last look with Clara, a silent promise of not forgetting the strength he had found within her. A decision loomed heavily in the air. The moment had arrived to confront not only his father, but the man he aspired to become. Just as he took a step forward, uncertainty gripped him once more. With every collision of ideals and expectations, everything he thought he knew began to fracture. What lay ahead was unknown territory, and Ethan felt the precipice of transformation pressing against him. Would he succumb to the old ways or leap to a new identity? The answer awaited him, teetering on the edge of confrontation. Ethan's heart thundered in his chest as he met his father's gaze, the coldness behind those piercing eyes like a slap to his conscience. The imposing figure of his father loomed large, exuding an air of control that had suffocated Ethan for years. He took another breath, feeling the weight of Clara's encouragement swirling like a tempest in his gut. Would he let that weight anchor him or propel him forward? "Now, Ethan," his father prompted, his tone sharp. There was no softness in his demeanor, just an unyielding demand for compliance. But what Ethan felt creeping up from within was an urge to break free. The myriad feelings of rebellion and anxiety danced in his mind, fueling a confusion that threatened to choke him. Swallowing hard, he clenched his fists, searching his father's face for any hint of humanity, of fatherly love. Instead, he found only a reflection of the empire that ensnared him.
They were watching, waiting for the fallout of the showdown, a spectacle of a sullied son rebelling against the empire. As the layers of facade they both wore began to peel, Ethan realized it was not merely his father he would confront. It was a confrontation with himself, an unmasking of all that he had accepted without question. He could feel Clara's metaphorical presence standing with him, a connective thread that reminded him of the potential within. With resolve stirring stronger than ever, Ethan prepared himself for whatever would come next. This reckoning could shatter bonds once thought unbreakable. The question remained, how far was he willing to go to define his own identity? That moment of introspection was shattered like glass as his father's voice loomed over him once more. "You want to know what it takes to lead? Prove it. But prepare yourself, son. If you step into this world, it will change you." Ethan looked into his father's eyes, seeing a challenge instead of certainty. As he stepped back towards the waiting crowd, a mix of exhilaration and dread surged through him, igniting his sense of choice with desperate intensity. The battle within him raged on. The external conflict had just begun, but his journey was only starting. The truth felt closer, just out of reach, beckoning him into a realm he could not yet fathom. What was he ready to sacrifice, and how much of himself would it take to uncover it all? The next stage awaited him, but this time he would no longer walk blindly into the unknown. Ethan took a deep breath, readying himself to face not just his father or the judgment of the crowd, but the hard questions within. The moment lingered, palpable and heavy. The willingness to step into the fray was one thing, but could he endure the heat of the truth? Ethan stepped away from the cauldron of his father's expectations and into the uneasy space of self-assertion. The laughter from the crowd ceased to feel like a judgment. Instead, it transformed into a distant echo, encouraging him towards a new horizon. Every step he took away from that tension-laden confrontation was underscored by a pulsating awareness of the direction he wanted to carve for himself. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that merged with the uncertainty deep within Ethan. Standing on the cusp of a journey feet from the family empire, he wrestled with the weight of legacy against the allure of independence. Words from that earlier confrontation gnawed at him. If you step into this world, it will change you. He was acutely aware of the truth clenched in his father's threat, and change loomed like a specter on the fringes of his newfound resolve. Glimpses of a different life danced in Ethan's mind, not just wealth or power, but purpose and impact. He thought of Clara, her unwavering belief in a better world, one defined not by wealth, but the value of integrity and kindness. What did it mean to him to truly live authentically? As he stepped from the library, a renewed sense of direction surged through him. He would engage the world not as the reluctant heir, but as a determined individual, ready to seize the lessons from his lineage, scrapping their toxicity while preserving their essence of perseverance. But amidst this budding confidence, fear prickled at the edges. Was he prepared for the confrontation that awaited him? Would abandoning the facade based on privilege lead him to ostracism? As those questions loomed larger, the gravity of his father's challenge echoed bitterly within him. Prepare yourself, son. If you step into this world, it will change you. Ethan could not ignore that uncertainty. Was he bold enough to embrace the change he sought? Each step would require foresight and authenticity, a willingness to embrace discomfort in forging his path forward. As he walked outside, the cool evening air sharpened his senses. He realized the essence of his quest lay not just in rebellion, but transformation.
It required embracing the very aspect of himself he so long ignored. And that's where real evolution began. Could he really face his father without succumbing to the old patterns? A shiver of trepidation coursed through him, but he welcomed it. This next confrontation would push boundaries, and for the first time, Ethan felt ready to confront the past with a vision of authenticity in his heart. The moment hung, pregnant with potential. Uncertainty may have writhen inside him, but there was something else, a budding confidence that this time he wouldn't just fight for the surface, but for a genuine legacy he could one day be proud of. And in the depths of the night, questions loomed ahead. What would this new course demand of him? The answer awaited him just beyond the threshold of his father's imposing world. Ethan stood outside, the night air thick with anticipation as he considered the confrontation that lay ahead. The towering family estate felt like an unmistakable fortress, its windows lit in a warm glow that belied the cold reality inside. He took a steadying breath, the weight of his impending choices pressing against his chest. The conversations after his earlier confrontation echoed in his mind, full of interpretation and misinterpretation, and a stark realization of how deep the divide felt between him and his father's expectations. As he approached the heavy double doors, he could hear the murmur of voices within, casual conversations that felt alien to him now. The world inside, a labyrinth of social maneuvering and unquestioned privilege, loomed larger than he had ever perceived. Each step felt deliberate, grounding him in the purpose he had unearthed just hours earlier. When Ethan entered, conversations stilled briefly, eyes drawn to his presence. He had been accustomed to this kind of scrutiny, yet tonight it felt different. This time, he wasn't here to fit into a mold. He was here to create a fissure in it.
He noticed his father, seated at the head of an ornately carved table, his gaze steady and appraising. The king surveying his domain, Ethan thought. "Ethan!" His father's voice boomed, layered with authority and an undercurrent of expectation. "You've returned." Something stirred within Ethan, determination intertwined with anxiety. "I need to talk to you," he stated, the edge of firmness slicing through the room's cordiality. "Is that so?" There was an amused glint in his father's eyes as the guests around them sipped their wine, whispering among themselves. "Interesting timing, as always. We're in the middle of an important discussion." There it was, the dismissal he had always feared. But this time it didn't turn into self-doubt. Instead, it catalyzed courage. "It's about our future," he pressed, drawing nearer to the table's edge. "Son, we can discuss our future at another time," his father replied, waving a hand dismissively. Yet Ethan could feel the unfamiliar spark of defiance glimmering beneath the polished veneer of his family's expectations. "No," Ethan insisted. He stepped forward, challenging both the decorum and the man. "This isn't just about future plans. It's about change and what legacy we choose to leave behind. We can be more than what's been handed to us." A ripple of disbelief coursed through the room. Their faces twisted in combinations of disbelief and intrigue. Ethan's heart raced, fueled by the urgency of his message. What if he could not only voice a challenge, but become the catalyst for transformation? The idea stoked the fire of rebellion in him. His father's expression darkened, words forming at the tip of his tongue that hinted at the anger brewing beneath the surface. "You think you know better than me? You're an heir to this legacy, not its architect," he spat, eyes piercing like arrows. With every ounce of courage Ethan possessed, he replied, "That's exactly the point. Being an heir doesn't mean perpetuating the past. It's about crafting something new, something that reflects integrity, purpose, and the needs of those we've ignored." The room grew quiet, tension soaking the air. Guests exchanged glances,
Unsure of how to process this unexpected confrontation, Ethan felt the weight of their scrutiny, each eye a reminder of his lineage and the unyielding pressure to conform. He steadied his resolve. "Consider this," Ethan continued, his voice steady. "What if the true measure of our worth lies not in the fortunes we amass, but in the impact we have on people's lives? Can we afford to turn a blind eye any longer?" His father leaned in, a frown deepening on his forehead. This was the real dance between them, not just a clash of wills, but an exploration of values, a plunge into vulnerability that demanded honesty. Could he shift the paradigm, even for a moment? In that charged silence, something shifted in Ethan. The fear of rejection loomed large, yet beneath it lay the warm pulse of conviction.
This was his moment to reclaim his identity, not as a mere extension of his father's will, but as an individual ready to confront the past and forge a new path. Yet the question tethered at the back of his mind: would his father respond to this call for transformation, or would he dig in deeper to uphold the status quo? Ethan's heart raced with the impending answer. The path ahead was riddled with uncertainty, but he no longer felt the constricting bonds of legacy. He was standing on the precipice of a new reality. As the tension thickened, he braced for the response that would shape their lives. Was his father's resistance just another stone in a wall, or the beginning of a bridge toward understanding? With the weight of that uncertainty treading upon him, he awaited the inevitable answer, knowing it would define the future they faced. Ethan stood his ground, adrenaline surging as he locked eyes with his father, waiting for the inevitable storm. Time slowed, each tick of the ornate clock on the wall echoing the tension in the room. The guests fell silent, the air thick with judgment and confusion. Ethan felt as though he had stepped beyond the threshold of familiarity into a realm where the stakes were decidedly higher. His father cleared his throat, the tension sharpening like a knife. "You think you can lecture me on legacy, Ethan? You've spent more time away from this family than you have within it. Your idealism is naive." The disdain rolled off his father's words like an icy wind. But something within Ethan sparked to life. He felt the weight of countless choices pressing against the back of his mind, each one a reminder of the privilege that had both uplifted and shackled him. "It's not naive to want change, Dad. It's what the world needs right now." Ethan's voice, steady and unwavering, surprised even him. It was as if he were confronting centuries of silence, centuries of his family's complacency. Yet doubt still nagged at him, wrapping around his resolve like vines on an old tree. He had never taken a stand like this. The fear of rejection from his father was an ever-present shadow. "I'm trying to understand, to grow," he pressed on, wrestling with the internal conflict of love and disappointment. "Why is our family's wealth not matched by our compassion? Why can't we redefine our position in this world instead of clinging to outdated ideals?" The guests shuddered at his boldness, some exchanging nervous glances. Ethan had interrupted a carefully curated facade, and he felt the irrational satisfaction that came from dismantling it. But then came a voice from the back, an older woman whose eyes sparkled with history and rebellion. "Easy for you to say, young man," she interjected, her tone soft but saturated with judgment. "Not everyone has the luxury of a choice. Some strive under the weight of this very legacy you want to reshape." Her words struck him like a lightning bolt. The realization dawned that privilege often clouded perspective, and he had naively overlooked the struggles of those caught in his family's shadow. His determination flickered momentarily, born from the weight of understanding. He needed to reconcile this. He needed a plan. Turning towards the crowd, Ethan's expression became resolute. "That's exactly my point. We have to acknowledge the pain tied to our legacy and do something about it. What can we lose in trying, rather than upholding a system that fails so many?" Ethan felt the heat from his father's furious stare.
The questions swirling in his mind crystallized into clarity. What sort of leader would he be if he inherited power only to perpetuate suffering? Versions of himself flashed before him, the unaware son, the traditional heir, and now the man standing boldly against his father, battling for a vision of hope. His father abruptly stood up, red-faced and trembling with fury. "You want change? Fine. If you think you know better, then take hold of this legacy. It's not an easy mantle, Ethan. It comes with its own burdens, consequences you are not prepared for." The challenge was out in the open, and Ethan felt both exhilaration and dread. To take on the family business meant navigating the labyrinthine expectations and unraveling the threads that bound generations of his lineage. The very thought sent a shudder through him. The path ahead was less clear now, but the resolve to try surged stronger. "Show me the way, then," Ethan said, the fire burning in his chest morphing into a tangible plan. "Let me take the reins and redefine what this family can stand for." His father's face was a mask of disbelief and anger. Ethan's heart raced, knowing he had crossed a line. But with each heartbeat, he felt the thrill of liberation begin to spread through him. Yet there was still the gnawing reality of the challenge he had issued. What would it take to truly transform this family legacy? The weight of his next move settled heavily on his shoulders as he awaited his father's response, uncertain of whether this would mark the beginning of an extraordinary journey or a further unraveling of their bonds. As his father stared at him, something flickered in his eyes that made Ethan's pulse quicken. Was it resentment or acceptance? The answer could pivot everything. Ethan could feel the air shift, a foundation trembling beneath both of them. What would this new path demand from him? What sacrifices would be required to forge a new reality? Uncertainty loomed like a cloud overhead, but he would not shy away. It was only just beginning, and whatever came next, he was ready to fight, not just for himself, but for everyone longing for a voice in the legacy he was determined to reshape. Ethan stood at the precipice of his newfound responsibility, his heart racing as the reality of his father's challenge settled heavily in his mind.
The room was still charged with tension, an unspoken anticipation hanging in the air as he awaited his father's retort. This moment meant more than just a rejection or acceptance. It was the invitation to a journey that would require every ounce of his strength, conviction, and heretofore untapped potential. As silence stretched between them, Ethan felt a ripple of unease. The magnitude of taking control of the family legacy consumed him. His mind raced through a labyrinth of possibilities. How could he shift the course of their history while grappling with the skepticism that ran deep within his family line? He imagined a world where wealth aligned with compassion, where privilege met responsibility. It was a work of art not yet painted. Currently, it was only a vision rattling around in his mind. "A mantle, you say?" Ethan finally broke the silence, voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "What if I choose not to carry the weight as it has always been done? What if we think differently, and instead of preserving our status quo, we redefine what it means to belong to this family?" His father's face twisted in disbelief, a physical manifestation of years spent in the protective bubble of tradition. "You think this is about rebranding, don't you?" The older man spat, each word laced with potential for rupture. "You cannot rewrite what has been established for generations with naive aspirations. You'll fall if you attempt it." The doubt in his father's voice clawed at Ethan's resolve. But at that moment, the possibility of failure took on a new meaning. With every obstacle he conjured in his mind, he also envisioned solutions. He understood that stepping outside of comfort meant embracing discomfort. His family's legacy was a double-edged sword, a privilege laced with unearned advantages, and he had a choice to wield it differently. "What if I fail?" Ethan pondered aloud, igniting a small ember of hope within himself.
Isn't that part of the process? The greatest leaders have faced failure time and time again, yet they emerged stronger. He felt a surge of conviction, a shadow of the passion that now burned brightly with purpose. In your quest for change, Ethan, anticipate not just opposition, but betrayal from our own. Family loyalty has its limits, his father warned, his tone now a mix of challenge and warning. But even as he acknowledged the truth in that statement, he couldn't ignore the inner strength budding within him. He had witnessed the quiet anguish of those left unheard in his family's narrative, and the fire ignited in him was stronger than the fear of familial loyalty crumbling. Then I start here. I'll face the betrayal if need be. Perhaps that's the first step towards rewriting our legacy. Each word fell from his lips with increased intensity, his newfound voice not just demanding to be heard, but determined to resonate. As he stepped back from the confrontation, Ethan reflected on his position.
The applause and acceptance of the guests faded into the background, eclipsed by the trembling resolve that surged within him. Who were the voices he wanted to amplify? What structural changes would he introduce to ensure that the wealth they passed down bore more than just their name, that it became a force for justice and change? There were plans to outline, allies to seek, and relationships to repair. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. Money could speak volumes, but so could intentions. With the weight of his family's expectations like a cloak on his shoulders, Ethan took a deep breath. This was it, the tipping point on a tightrope of ambition before him. To slip would mean falling into a predictable abyss, but the potential to redefine everything he understood was intoxicating. Yet he felt the chilling reality of what lay ahead. There would be resistance, not just from his father, but from the legacy built on arrogance and silence. Was he truly prepared for the fallout, the disapproval, and the haunting echoes of his own doubts? Determined, he squared his shoulders. The journey ahead was vast and uncertain. The measure of his evolution would not come merely from achievements, but through the crucible of hardship. As he stood at the crossroads of change, Ethan wondered just who his father would rally beside him, now that the challenge had been thrown down. The clock continued to tick ominously, each second a reminder of the impending storm he had chosen to confront. Behind everything, a lingering question grew louder with every heartbeat. What sacrifices would he have to make to truly shift the foundation of his family's legacy? In that moment, Ethan understood that he had merely scratched the surface of this transformation. The real battle was on the horizon, and he sensed a confrontation brewing not just with his father, but within himself. Would he rise to meet it, or would he falter among his own ambitions? Ethan awoke the following morning, dampened by a restless night that felt like a weight pressing into his chest. The quiet of the lavish room, bathed in morning light, contrasted starkly with the tempest churning inside him. He replayed the confrontation with his father, each word forged in fire and still reverberating in his mind. There was no turning back now. Everything had changed, even if it was just his own perception. As he dressed, he couldn't shake the lingering fear of inadequacy. Would he really have the strength to transform a legacy built on exclusivity into one of inclusivity? Looking in the mirror, he forced a smile, searching for confidence within. Beneath the facade of privilege, he felt raw and unprepared. The legacy he had inherited was steeped in elitism, and he had the ambition to rewrite its narrative. Yet the question remained. Could he truly effect change, or would he perpetuate the cycle of affluence without compassion? With a determined step, he headed to the office.
His father's world was a maze of board meetings and financial forecasts, territory he had always regarded with a mixture of awe and detachment. Yet today, armed with a newfound purpose, he was resolute in his intention to challenge the established norms. Perhaps he could summon the courage to present radical ideas that would resonate. But who would listen? The elevator ride felt interminable. With each floor descended, his resolve mingled with anxiety. At last he entered the tempered glass walls of the family firm, the air charged with a mix of ambition and uncertainty. Gray suits shuffled around him, laughter mingling with hushed whispers of investment secrets. As he passed by familiar faces, the veneer of polished confidence began to fray. Would these colleagues see him as the heir determined to dismantle their comfortable status quo? Before he could second-guess himself, Ethan swung open the door to the conference room. The committee members turned, eyebrows raised in curiosity. He swallowed hard, a choreographed speech kindling in his mind, a merge of strategy, compassion, and vision. "Thank you for gathering," he began, grounding his voice. "I know we've historically focused on profit above all else, but I believe we have the chance to redefine success. We can be the first in our industry to invest not just in our returns, but in people, those who've remained on the periphery of our influence." The silence was deafening, broken only by the shuffle of papers and the exchange of incredulous glances. His pocket felt heavy with the weight of unfulfilled expectations and family legacies that had imprisoned him. "What do you mean by invest in people?" an older board member asked, skepticism etched on his face. "I mean shifting our focus to social responsibility. We could start initiatives that elevate underrepresented voices, partner with community-led organizations, and actively seek to empower those in need." The tremor lacing his words surprised him, but the firmness behind them was potent. "What benefit would that serve us?" a different voice cut in. Ethan inhaled sharply and stood taller. What if the benefit is creating a better world? Public perception is shifting. We could lead the charge instead of clinging to outdated paradigms. This isn't about rebranding. It's about aligning our values with purposeful action. As he spoke, he saw the dust settle in their minds, confrontation crystallizing into recognition. He felt the challenge burning within him, igniting a latent fire. After what felt like an eternity, murmurs of doubt escalated into genuine dialogue. Among the pushing and shoving of ideas, something vital shifted. Perhaps this initial step could rally allies, or at least provoke meaningful debate. But then he felt the sharp sting of realization. Was he truly ready for the upheaval his ideas would undoubtedly incite? The urgency of considering his father's close-mindedness loomed. The weight of his family's values threatened to smother his resolve. As he left the conference room, exhilaration melded with trepidation. Ethan understood that he had begun carving a path forward, but all he achieved could still crumble beneath the weight of old beliefs. How would he confront those who would undoubtedly oppose him? What alliances could form amidst the brewing storm, and at what cost? He locked eyes with a colleague who seemed intrigued yet wary. There was a connection, one that hinted at shared ambitions. With a nod, he gestured as if to say, "This is just the beginning." But deep down, uncertainty gnawed at him. Would the delicate threads of his ambition weave a safety net, or unravel completely against the harsh reality of pushback? The emerging question settled heavily in his gut. What would his father's next move be? Ethan felt a storm building, realizing only too late that the battle was not merely against tradition, but against his own fear of failure, and it was approaching fast. The following day dawned with the same heaviness that had greeted Ethan upon entering the conference room. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to tame the wild thoughts that raced through his mind. His colleagues' reactions had unsettled him more than he cared to admit. He had ventured boldly, but now the aftermath felt like a looming cloud, threatening to unleash a storm. Yet nestled within that anxiety was a flicker of resolve. He understood that the journey he had embarked upon would not be met with easy acceptance. With each step into the office, the ghost of his father's shadow loomed, a constant reminder of the legacy he had inherited and the expectations that accompanied it. As the morning unfolded, Ethan found himself replaying the past day's events. Each interaction felt like a chess match, the board scattered with pieces of doubt and strategy. What had he truly achieved? He had stirred the pot, but the contents could either boil over or settle peacefully. He hesitated almost subconsciously as he picked up the phone. Each call to potential allies felt monumental, laden with both potential and peril. He took a moment to consider who might share his vision. Slowly, he narrowed his focus to a handful of colleagues, those who had shown an inkling of support in the conference room. He carefully crafted messages, expressing his determination to form a coalition within the firm. His heart raced each time he hit send, as if he were sending lifelines into an abyss. Hours passed. Conversations devolved into silent stares and whispered skepticism. The atmosphere around the office grew thick with doubt. Ethan felt it, the resistance of the old guard tightening its grip on the firm. The memory of his father's voice echoed, a reminder of tradition and the comfort of proven success. Each time he charted a new path, he felt the weight of disapproval pressing down. It was at lunch that the first flicker of progress ignited hope within him.
He had decided to approach Naomi, an individual he had always respected for her sharp intellect and unwavering honesty. She thrived in marketing, and he knew she had been quietly pushing for a broader strategy, one that resonated with consumer sentiments. As he approached her, he held his breath, both fearful and hopeful in equal measure. "Ethan," she greeted him, her eyes scanning the uncertainty that shadowed his demeanor. "You seemed passionate at the meeting yesterday. Did you really mean what you said about social responsibility?" Her question bore the weight of his convictions. "I did," he replied, steadying his voice. "I think we can leverage our resources to create something meaningful, but I'm starting to think I need allies to move forward, or this might all be an exercise in futility." Naomi smiled, a glimmer of support piercing through the fog of doubt. "I'd like to help," she said. "You're not the only one who feels there's potential for change. Let's brainstorm some ideas. We might just have enough push to make our voices heard." Ethan could scarcely believe his ears. He had dared to hope, and perhaps her support could act as a catalyst for something greater within the firm. They spent the next hour animatedly exchanging ideas, momentum building as each suggestion blossomed into a potential initiative. The feeling of empowerment washed over him. This was how change could begin, not just as a solitary endeavor, but through collaboration. After their meeting, however, a deep unease settled. With each small victory came the specter of resistance. With a coalition taking form, Ethan began to think more critically about next steps. How would he reveal his fast-growing agenda to the board? How would he address inevitable pushback? With Naomi's conviction behind him, Ethan felt driven, yet reality reminded him that the wall of tradition would not buckle easily. As he left the office, he couldn't shake the sense that the tide was turning, but any breakthrough would likely be met with fierce opposition. The question remained not only how to cultivate and nurture alliances, but how to strategically dismantle the deep-rooted skepticism that flowed through the firm. Tomorrow would be the day he confronted the current head of operations, a long-time skeptic of change. They had a history, and Ethan questioned whether past loyalties would work against him. Was he ready to face the lightning bolt of dissent? Amid this swelling anticipation, an insistent thought resided. What would it take for him to solidify his influence against the increasingly evident tide of opposition? The sun broke through the branches as Ethan descended the staircase of Prescott Enterprises, dawn illuminating his apron of vulnerability and resolve. Today marked the latest chapter in his quest to redefine his family's legacy, not merely in the light of wealth, but in purpose and impact. He felt the inertia of the past wrapping around him like an unwanted shroud. It threatened to pull him under, but the flicker of hope ignited by Naomi's support burned bright enough to keep him afloat. He entered the conference room, an arena of ideas that he had often feared, but now saw as the place to ignite change. His colleagues gathered, faces filled with mixed emotions, from skepticism to curiosity. Ethan squared his shoulders, prepared to confront the opposing force that had dominated this room for far too long. His heart pounded like a drum, reverberating his commitment to bring forth a dialogue on social responsibility, community engagement, and a new meaning for the Prescott name. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, his voice gaining strength, each word meticulously chosen. "Today, I want to share a vision. We have the opportunity to embark on a transformative journey that empowers not only our shareholders, but also our community." The silence around the table was palpable. Ethan noted the shifting expressions, some intrigued, others hostile, but he pressed forward. He articulated the value of investing in people, of lifting those who had long been overshadowed by wealth and privilege. The energy in the room swirled between resistance and possibility, tugging vigorously at Ethan's ambition. "Are you advocating for a complete overhaul of our strategy, Ethan?" An older board member's voice cut through the air with a sharp edge, eyes narrowing. "No, what I propose is a necessary evolution," Ethan countered, vaulting the challenge. "I'm not asking for us to abandon our profit motives, but to expand them. If we align our work with meaningful initiatives, we create a lasting impact while still ensuring financial stability. The two can coexist." As he spoke, he could feel the focus sharpening, retracting the veil of doubt cloaked over the possibilities in the room. He detailed specific initiatives, partnerships with nonprofit organizations, community outreach programs, and fostering dialogue that could bridge the gap between the corporation and society. Naomi's affirmative nods encouraged him. She was a lighthouse amidst turbulent waters, signaling that he wasn't alone in this battle. Unfurling a banner of ideas laid a foundation beneath his sentiments. Every proposal held potential. "The world is changing, and so must we. Our success hinges not just on profits, but on our ethical compass. Let's be the leaders who harness privilege for purpose. Together, we can create a sustainability initiative that resonates with both customers and communities." The room buzzed with murmurs, striking reactions rippling like wind across the surface of a lake. Ethan sensed the first tangible movement of conviction and commitment swell within. "Ethan, your aspirations are admirable," an indifferent voice broke his flow. Matt, the skeptical head of operations, who had never been one to welcome change. "But have you considered the financial implications? Switching gears may jeopardize our bottom line. Our shareholders won't appreciate this audacity." Ethan recognized Matt's voice for what it was, a manifestation of the traditionalist mindset that frightened many into conformity. Not to be deterred, Ethan felt a surge of determination. "On the contrary, Matt, history shows the most resilient companies are the ones that prioritize social responsibility. Consumer preferences have shifted. They want to invest in brands aligned with their values. A commitment to social equity can generate loyalty and profits." His words resonated. Ethan ignited the flames of realization, encouraging others to see that embracing change did not mean sacrifice. Rather, it promised growth. Each assertion solidified like bricks in the wall of possibility. He was planting seeds of empathy in a garden starved for cultivation. "Let's put this to a vote." Naomi's voice rose above the buzz, encouraging support he desperately needed. "What do you all think? Are you in favor of supporting Ethan's initiatives to approach our corporate strategy differently?" With a mix of anticipation flooded with unease, Ethan watched as chairs shifted and testimonies of both hesitation and excitement unfolded.
Ethan felt the ground beneath him tremble, realizing he was carving his space, not just as an heir, but as a leader. While they debated the proposals, he witnessed the fusion of conviction gathering like storm clouds overhead, a revolution creeping closer by the second. Ultimately, votes echoed throughout the room, a testament to the collective will stirring around them. And as disbelief melted into affirmation, Ethan sensed a palpable shift. He stood at the helm of change, navigating the tides of legacy towards a horizon filled with promise. As the meeting adjourned, Ethan didn't let complacency creep back in. The battle was won, yet the war was far from over. Empowered yet mindful of resistance, he marched back to his desk with purpose, reinforced by the bombs of uncertainty echoing behind him. A sense of satisfaction washed over him, each heartbeat drumming the anthem of defiance in his veins. Days turned into weeks, the proposals began to materialize, and Ethan's initiatives took on lives of their own. Not without resistance, his father became increasingly upset, seeing these changes as a threat to the empire he had painstakingly built. Yet Ethan remained resolute, knowing that true leadership meant choosing authenticity over comfort. That new name for Prescott Enterprises would resonate deeper than any prophet ever could. And with every step he took further into this verdant field of potential, his heart surged with fulfillment. He wore the indelible badge of commitment, not for himself, but for those who remained unheard. The moment of metamorphosis had arrived, laying the groundwork to redefine Prescott. The promise of change now unfolded before him like a map to a new world, one where dignity bore a purpose far greater than wealth alone. As the final touches melded into his daily routine, Ethan packed his briefcase, readying himself for another long day. He took a moment to reflect on the journey that brought him here, his battles fought not solely for his own growth, but to dismantle a legacy ingrained in a world he was now working to change. And though future challenges lay ahead, from his fingers ran the steadiness of resilience and the whispering strength of self-discovery, reminding him that he was the architect of a legacy spun from indomitable spirit and compassion. Both pride and uncertainty mixed within him, the quiet acknowledgement that the path would grow enchantingly complex. But to Ethan Prescott, the architect of his destiny, these challenges would be welcomed opportunities, not roadblocks toward success. In that embracing thought, Ethan opened the door to a world awash with promise, where connections explored the art of redefining identity, breathless with the desire for profound change. The road ahead was fraught with trials, yet fortified by the knowledge that true legacy cannot merely be inherited, it has to be forged. The dawn was just beginning. Only time would reveal the tapestry woven by this transformation, but Ethan had committed to facing it all head-on, with Clara's words echoing in the chambers of his heart. You have the power to choose who you want to be. He was becoming the leader he aspired to be, one who embraced the thrill of possibilities, a builder of a new legacy. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.